My guest April Valle is an urban planner and designer with experience that includes a number of projects recognized for excellence in planning and community engagement in Melbourne, Australia, and the Philippines. As a built environment professional, she is interested in strengthening partnerships across disciplines and in working together towards improving livability in cities. As a co-convenor of Placemaking Davao, she advocates for community-led design and better public spaces in Davao City, Philippines. In this episode, we talked about her passion and perception about public spaces, how it was shaped and evolved, and her vision for future about it as well. Assalamu alaikum and hello everyone. I am Asban Sari, the founder of the organization Peacemakers Pakistani, and I am bringing you the stories of placemakers, artists, and professionals from around the globe about how they created an impact and made change happen. You are listening to the Making It Happen show. Thank you for joining in. Enjoy the episode. Hi, April. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you and how's life going?
Great, Hasba. Thank you so much for inviting me. Very honored to be a guest on your podcast. I'm doing great. It's amazing weather where I am right now in the world. It's also currently summer, so I'm in a good mood today.
And I'm just amazed by having such discussions with people around the world and seeing that when they are excited about summers and how frustrated we are with the summers. Yeah, the energy in summer is different, but still, like in our part of the world, it's very hot, very hot. Like we are not in good mood at all.
Oh no, yeah. Yeah, it for us it really makes a big difference when the sun is out. It puts everyone in a good mood. But I understand as well when it's really, really hot, especially if you come from a hot country. So I'm originally from the Philippines, and in the Philippines it can get pretty hot. So yeah, I also understand the perspective that you're coming from.
Yeah, but yeah, it's maybe because I'm currently in that situation. Maybe that's why it's different for me. But yes, I remember when they are winter, we have winters here because we have intense winters as well. So when there's sun, we are excited on that day. Yeah, I get it now.
Definitely,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Okay, so let's start. I want to know more about you, and I'm excited that we got in touch and we are having this conversation. So let's start. How did you find your passion for urban planning and design and placemaking?
Sure. So my profession, I would consider myself to be an urban planner and an urban designer. And I found this passion through basically when I studied for my undergrad, I started with an architecture and planning degree. And at that time, I didn't know what urban planning was. I decided I wanted to be an architect because I really like design and I like buildings. And this is an appreciation that I gained from traveling. But then when I was studying that degree, that's when I realized that it's not just the buildings that I like, but it's actually the spaces where these buildings are found. And also the other thing that I realized is from travels that I've done is that I really appreciate the differences and the similarities in public space. So I guess this is where the passion started. And I would say that I guess that it was enhanced even more when I moved to Melbourne, Australia. So I lived in Melbourne for a few years. I did my master's there and I also worked there for a few years. And I will say that my time living there was when I actually became more interested in urban design. So for those that don't know, Melbourne is always considered as one of the most livable cities in the world. So when I was there studying my master's in urban planning, that's what got me curious about what actually makes Melbourne livable and why would other places, other cities consider it to be livable. So it's that curiosity about why is Melbourne successful in that aspect. And then having worked in urban design, urban planning in Melbourne, I think that's when I got introduced to placemaking, which is basically it's hard to define what placemaking is, but for me, it has something to do with how connected people are to a space. So it goes from not just being a space, but to an actual place. So something that they have a connection with, something that they can make memories with. And I would say that the passion for placemaking was reignited once more during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I was actually living back in the Philippines already. And I guess with the uncertainty around what would be happening to the world after the pandemic, if the pandemic was going to end, and also the decisions made around, like how do we use public space? Because that was a big factor during COVID, like the spatial distancing and everything. Um, that got me more into thinking about, okay, how do we actually design spaces so that it fits better into how we use them? And what are the methods in which we can, I guess, research the use of space so that we reflect that in the designs that we make? And how do we make sure that these processes are inclusive? So when I talk about processes, I'm talking about planning, design, and management of public space. And when we talk about the processes, I also mean not just like that side of it, but also like how do you communicate to others the decisions that you make, the designs that you are creating, because that was another thing that really frustrated me during COVID, how there was kind of a lack of, or maybe it was considered just an afterthought, like how do you communicate properly to people so that everyone is happy and everyone kind of feels like they're heard. So yeah, and then just I guess that was like the evolution of like how I really got into urban planning and urban design, and then how that like moved on to placemaking, which is where I consider myself to be right now.
Amazing journey. And I'm so glad that it all came together for you in a better way. Like your actual passion area that was about all these spaces, like not just building a spaces. So not only buildings, but spaces as well. So I'm excited about that to see your work and how it's going and how it's going to go in the future as well. Okay, so you have done planning and community engagement projects in Melbourne, Australia. So what were the challenges and opportunities on these places? Like you've shared some that you learned about the livable cities, how livable cities are. So what were the challenges as well there?
Mm-hmm. So in Melbourne, if it's okay to compare it with the Philippines, which is another place I've worked in. So I would say that each place is really shaped by the priorities and the values that its residents or its stakeholders have. So, for example, in Melbourne, there was a lot of value placed on housing and inclusive planning. So, usually, like when we talk about urban planning, those are the two main issues that would always come up. So, there's a housing crisis in Melbourne, but this is also evident in so many other cities around the world. But it's just that in Melbourne, they value this more. So this is why this is always brought into the discussion whenever we talk about urban planning. And then there's also that discussion around inclusive planning. So how do we make sure that when we do our plans or when we do designs, we're actually consulting with stakeholders. And when we talk about stakeholders, this includes consulting more with local residents, so people that are not technical persons, they're not professionals, but they are also affected by it because they're the end users of the space. And also consulting more with traditional owners. So in Australia, as you know, it has a very rich indigenous culture, and they're trying to bring more of that out when it comes to design processes. So in comparison, so as I've said, each place, each context is very unique depending on what people prioritize and what they really value. And I guess like the main challenges that they face. So in comparison to Australia, working in the Philippines, the two main issues that are usually talked about is climate change and traffic. So climate change, because in case you didn't know, the Philippines is actually one of the most disaster-prone countries in the world. So every year we have a few typhoons, we have earthquakes, and all the things brought up that's made worse by climate change. And then there's also traffic. So Manila is infamously known to be one of the places that's got the worst traffic in the world. So again, like, yeah, that how do you make sure that this does not affect like economic output or the well-being of people and people's lifestyles and all of that. So as you can see, each place has its own unique challenges. I mean, sorry, not unique. What I'm trying to say is these challenges are present in every city. It's just that they have different priorities which they're trying to solve.
Rightly put together, yep. And I'm happy that despite of having all these challenges and you're not giving up on your country and you're trying to bring change over there. You're trying to take stand for their well-being. So that's something for a great applause. Um, Tell me about placemaking Davao and what are your goals and objectives and your vision for it overall.
Sure. So Placemaking Davao is a group that we co-founded. So myself and my partner in this, we founded this in 2022. So, and this was made possible through a grant from the Australian Embassy in the Philippines. So for those that didn't know, in case there are people listening here that are from the Philippines, so the Australian Embassy every year they give out a grant to anyone who is an alumni of an Australian institution. So in my case, because I have a master's degree from the University of Melbourne, I was eligible for this grant. So it's for development projects mostly, and basically the project was to bring awareness to and advocate for community-led initiatives and better public space design. So just for context, in 2022, we were still kind of recovering from the pandemic. And then at this time, because of the political context of Davao, which is where our project was based at, there was actually a lot of major infrastructure investments into the city and urban development. However, what we found lacking was that it was a lot of, like I said, major infrastructure focus on that, but not really so much on, I guess, the perspective of these projects in terms of how does it actually contribute to the well-being of people? Are we promoting active mobility? So are we prioritizing pedestrians and cyclists? Are our processes inclusive? So that I spoke earlier about inclusive design processes, so meaning better community engagement. So this is why we started Placemaking Davao, because we wanted to bring awareness to the fact that in many other places around the world, they are trying to adapt their processes to be more inclusive, so that even in the earlier stages of development, you're already consulting with your end users, but also that we also wanted to as well bring together like-minded people, so people that are also doing their own little projects elsewhere. We wanted to create a stronger network, and that's how we founded Placemaking Davao, with the hopes that everyone can come together and we can work on projects together and we can advocate for them together so that we can involve government and other stakeholders in the future.
Awesome. And I wish you good luck for all the work that have been doing and you're willing to do in your country. And I'm excited to look and I'm looking forward to whatever you're doing. So keep posting. Um, okay, so would you like to share any place attachment story with Philippines and so we can know more about it?
Sure. So interesting question, because in one of the placemaking sessions that I've done, the way that the facilitator started the workshop was she actually asked each person to talk about their favorite place and why it was their favorite place. So what was interesting was mostly everyone chose a place. So their favorite place was actually related to memories of their childhood or being around family or friends. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I said that what makes a space a place is the fact that you have a connection or a memory to that place. So it's really interesting how mostly mostly everyone's favorite place was because it had something to do with their childhood. So for me, my favorite places in the Philippines definitely have something to do with the fact that this was a place that I remember from my childhood, and I've made memories of that because of families and friends. So currently, I don't live in the Philippines anymore, but every time I come to visit, it's always nostalgic whenever I see landmarks and I recognize them, and whenever I remember memories that have been made there. So again, in my work, this is something that I try to do. I really try to find out what people value in a place and what memories have they made with the place, so that I can try to understand why is it that they have such a strong attachment to the place, so that this can be something that I can reflect on whenever I create designs or plans for future public spaces.
Awesome, great approach. And yes, that means a lot because um, the places that we love, we try to protect them. If we are not attached to any place, then it's hard for us to advocate for that as well. And yes, being a leader, I had to learn that we have to ignite that spark in people to feel connection to their places and then raise voice for it. So it
Yeah,
has
definitely.
passion, it has a
I
strong,
think
yeah, sorry.
it also influences what people think about a space. So if they have a strong attachment to it and they value a place, they actually take care of it more. They make sure that they are stewards of the place, so they try not to litter, or they try not to, they try to make sure that this place is always in order, so that they also can enjoy the space. Because I've seen a lot of, for example, new developments which do not really resonate with like what people value about the original spaces. So in the end, it's not being well used. They don't really enjoy being there. um, yeah, it's overall, if you don't have that attachment to place, it's not really a successful project, in my opinion.
Yes, and different people prioritizes different thing as well. So not all can relate to a place, but majority can. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's through more inclusive engagement processes wherein you can actually learn what people find attachment to and what they value about something. So that's why we advocate that this be done in earlier stages as much as possible, so that you can really find out who do you think will use your space and what do they like about it, so that you can reflect these on the design that you are creating.
Definitely. Okay, so you have mentioned a bit that traveling has helped you in shaping your vision and shaping your passion for places. But I would like to emphasize more on this question that you have been traveling and studying in different parts of the world. So how has it shaped your perception about places, communities, and people, and your attachment to different places that you have been? How had that it shaped your perception about others and about your own self?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for this question. So, just as a background, I am someone that other people might consider a third culture kid. So, I don't know if you've heard of the term, but a third culture kid is someone who has grown up in a literally third culture because it's probably in a geographic location where their parents are not from. So, in my case, my parents are from the Philippines, but I actually grew up in Japan as well from an early age. And as you've mentioned, I've also lived in a few other places, whether that be through work or study. So even though I am Filipino, I also have memories of growing up in a different culture from my own. So for me, as a third culture kid, I think that when I travel, I really try to I try to find what other places might have in connection or similarity with the Philippines, which is where I consider home to be. So it makes me appreciate also how um, places can be so different. So it's not just a country as a whole, but also individual cities in each country. They each have their own uniqueness. And then within these cities, you also have districts that might be different from other districts or neighborhoods. So I find that really, really interesting. And it's just acknowledging that we have very diverse cultures around the world or are in different cities or countries. And these are things that we definitely need to consider as urban designers. And it's also interesting how these spaces are shaped by their local culture, but also like the different lifestyles and the routines that people living in these cities have. And yeah, so earlier I spoke about how for me it's very interesting when I'm overseas to try to find similarities that they have with the Philippines. So one of my favorite places actually that I have visited is Havana in Cuba. So for me, Havana is very, very interesting because for me, Havana is what I imagine Manila in the Philippines to have looked like before. So for context, Manila is the capital of the Philippines, and during World War II, most of it was actually bombed. So we don't really have a lot of heritage districts left in Manila. There's only a few buildings left. But in terms of how Manila and Havana were developed, so they're both Spanish colonial cities. They're both port cities. They both have like this old town that's like a walled city, so it's like a fort inside. So similarities like that, it's so interesting for me because they're in opposite parts of the world. And there's also, I think, American influences in Havana, which Manila has a lot of. So it's like when you look at these two places, it's like they don't even speak the same language, but the like the way that the cities have been developed through its history is so similar, even though they're on opposite sides of the world. So for me, that was very, very interesting. But it also, even if they're very similar, like the way that people live or the way that they use the space, there's still some differences. And like I said, there are similarities. But yeah, just things like this, like little details like that, I find the most interesting because, like I said, spaces are used by people and we are all very individual, we're all very diverse, so it's like small details like that really make it successful, I think.
That's heartwarming, the way you were sharing it and the way you have lived through it, um, trying to relate to your to Philippines and how you carried it within yourself, still while not living there. That's beautiful. And about Havana, I hope you must be in contact with Gabriela Garcia Portondo, who is the founder or co-founder of Placemaking Cuba Network. So you
Yeah,
will,
that would be amazing.
yeah,
I'd love to come back again because the last time I went, it was only for a few days. And that was my first time in Cuba. So, of course, my priorities were to do the touristy things, but I'd love to come back and connect more with the locals. Cubans are so friendly and they're just so full of life. So, yeah, it would be very, very nice to be able to go back again one day.
great. Um, okay. So, as a well-recognized individual in the field of urban planning and design, what shifts would you like to see in this particular field and how cities are shaped?
So, I would say that there's already enough talent around when it comes to yeah, meeting people and colleagues that are working in this industry or in this sector. But I think that one thing that everyone can improve on so that we can create better public spaces or more livable cities is I think trying to find or create opportunities so that the community engagement activities that we do are more meaningful. And I've spoken a lot about connections that people have to places, and definitely this is knowledge that we learn through actually engaging with the end users and a variety of stakeholders, not just the usual stakeholders that we normally engage with. So I would encourage all of my colleagues as much as possible if we can try to include more community engagement and make sure that it's meaningful, it's not just tokenistic, so that we can try to involve more stakeholders in the work that we do. And another thing, I guess, that I would like to see more of is I really find that whenever we collaborate with other colleagues or other departments that we don't normally work with, that's when we create innovation. So whether that be through different professionals, so maybe I don't know, engineers working with landscape architects, they don't always work together, but when they work together, they might find something that's something unique, like a new way to do things that creates more benefits for everyone. Or this could also be just departments within city governments that don't normally work together. So I understand there's also a lot of time and other kinds of resources that need to be invested when we do things like this. But my answer to that is it really depends on what you prioritize. So if we would prioritize the well-being of our end users more, this is definitely a way that we can make sure that the outcomes that we have can be achieved.
Thanks, and it's a great message, and I hope it inspires people to think this way as well, because our cities and our world actually needs it. Great. Okay, so these were the questions solely for you, and I would like to know more about you in the rapid fire session, which I ask everyone. So, what drives you? What keeps you focused on the work that you do?
I am not the most driven person, I would say. Um, but I guess something that I tell myself is that everyone faces setbacks and challenges. These are inevitable, but let's try not to let these challenges consume us. Otherwise, we really lose our motivation and our vision. And I always tell myself that no matter how big the challenge is, we just have to try to keep moving forward. And how we do that is we just take them step by step. So, for example, if we have huge challenges that we are facing, we have to acknowledge that it will take time for us to be able to overcome those. So, again, take them step by step. And just make sure that you focus on matters that you can control and don't feel too bad outcomes don't when the outcomes are not really the way that you want things to be. Because like I said, if you don't have control over them, there's really no point in being sad about that. So just focus on what you can control. And lastly, I would also say that we should try to look for like-minded people or people that have the same passion as us and try to surround ourselves more with people like that. Because these are, in the end, when you face these challenges, these are the people that will be your supporters through your challenging times. And like any challenge, even though we can face them individually, it of course will always help if you have other people cheering for you.
Awesome. Your positive attitude is great and definitely is going to take you so far, inshallah. So lovely. Okay.
I hope so.
Yeah, consistency and efforts are best one. The positive attitude. That's going to take you.
Mm.
Okay, so would you like to share any proudest moment of your work life till now?
Sorry, what was the question again?
Proudest moment of your work life. Any moment that made you feel proud about the work that you do.
Proudest moment of my work life. I think I'm not going to name individual projects because I have this mindset wherein even though there is one particular project that I'm very, very proud of, I'd always like to challenge myself that my next project will be even better than that. So I would say that the satisfaction that I get from my work is when I hear feedback from people that we engage with that are not professionals. So they're not urban designers, so they're not planners, they're not technical persons. When we hear good feedback from them about the projects that we do and how it has affected their life in a positive way, that really motivates me to do better. And that makes me very proud of the work that I do.
Sweet. And what was your hardest moment of your work life?
Ooh, um, I would say that it was during the pandemic. So maybe some people might agree with me as well. So during the pandemic, we of course were faced with lockdowns. There was a lot of uncertainty. Maybe there was a lot of disappointment with how decisions were made in terms of how do we go about with dealing with the pandemic. So yeah, definitely that was a low moment for me because in my industry, so built environment or construction, that's my sector. There was not really a lot of investment going on that side because it wasn't a priority, obviously. So in terms of yeah, my professional life, that was a very low moment, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what the future will bring. However, at the same time, it was also a good time to be because that uncertainty allowed us to create opportunities because at that time there was also an acknowledgement that things needed to be done differently so that we can make sure that if ever we do get another pandemic, we will be prepared. So yes, lots of uncertainty that went on for a very long time, but I'm very glad that we're over that now.
Yes, Alhamdulillah. Okay, do you have any favorite placemaking mantra or any quote that you remember while doing your work?
Mm, so I guess my mantra would be every time I do a project, like I said, I really try to challenge myself to do better for the next project. Um, and the other thing that I remind myself is every time you do work, especially in my field, because we work with public space for a lot of projects, just try to make sure that if you think of it as so your work, you're not just doing it for yourself or not just for the people that you are currently working with. You're actually doing it for future generations because when we talk about the built environment, this is something that will last for, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 years. In some places, they've lasted more than 1,000 years. So when you think of your project, think of it as what is your legacy for future generations? And I think that will also motivate you to make sure that you're doing the best and that you are being very open-minded and you're really pouring out creativity so that you make sure that this space is appreciated not just by the current generations, but tens of hundreds of generations down the line.
Sweet, it's beautiful. And the tools focuses that you have shared right now emphasizes how and why you have considered the difficult situation of how you have tackled the difficult situation of COVID, that you were looking for the solutions that if we have another pandemic, we are able to face it in a better way. So, how you're dealing with that situation, it highlights how you are and how your personality is. And again, the positive attitude. I love it. Um, okay, so do you have any opinion about Pakistan or placemaking in Pakistan?
So I have actually never been to Pakistan before, but I have some friends from Pakistan. In fact, a few years ago, I met somebody at a conference in Indonesia, and he is inviting me to go to Pakistan this year for the next edition of that conference. So this conference is going to be held in Islamabad, and I've seen photos of it, and it looks amazing. Beautiful architecture, the landscapes look really surreal. So hopefully I can try and make it this year, and if not, definitely something that I'm very curious about and would like to learn more of.
That's a good news. And when you are coming here, we'll figure out a way to meet, hopefully. So, yeah,
Yes, definitely. Yeah, like I said, the thing I like about traveling is trying to find connections with local people. So it's not just the big landmarks or the touristy sites, but also learning about how locals, like what their routines are, how they live, because that's very relevant also to my work. So
yeah,
definitely
so
every time I travel, I try to make an opportunity to really connect with people from that space.
great. And if you have enough time to visit here, I hope you visit both cities, like Islamabad and Lahore. They are totally different and they have their own vibe because
Mm-hmm.
Islamabad has great landscape and Lahore has great buildings, heritage, and traffic.
Mm-hmm.
But the traffic keeps
Mm-hmm.
moving here, so that's the best part. Right now, I hope
Yeah, so it goes back to what I said
it's
earlier
getting
about how different countries are different, but also cities within those countries are also different.
very
So that's why it's just have to be more open-minded about things and just keep learning about them.
great. Okay, so do you have any advice for the young professionals who are joining in?
Young professionals that are joining in. Um, I would say that I know this younger generation is more outspoken than my generation, um, but maybe perhaps this might still apply to them. So I would say to them, try to connect more with your older colleagues because I think we have a lot to learn from you too. Um, because in my time, I think there was some intimidation with, like talking to someone older than you or someone more experienced. But in fact, the more that we have, the more that we communicate with each other, the more that we try to understand each other, it's actually better for everyone because we gain an insight into what different age groups value, what their approach is when it comes to life. It's not just work, but also life. And in that way, we become more open-minded. And I think this really reflects on how we live as well. So I say, yeah, like just try to like connect with others. Don't limit yourselves to just your own age group, but try to make friends with older or younger people as well.
That's such a great and kind advice because I hope it's not going to just be helpful for the older ones, but actually the younger ones as well in the long run, I believe. And
Mhm.
I hope the older ones are more open and listening towards the younger ones because a little shutdown call and they are off. So that's
Yeah.
that has to be worked upon. And it was a
Yeah.
great one. Thank you so much, Apple. I think it's a wrap here. And it was a great one. And it was full of so many amazing advices from you. And the way you are very focused on the things that you believe in and the way you work, that's inspirational. So thank you so much for sharing it with me. And thank you for so much for your time. I hope to stay connected and we'll talk in future as well.
Thank you as well, Asma, for inviting me to be part of your podcast. Um, and yeah, I really appreciate that we're connecting, even though we're from different countries. It's really insightful for me to learn more about how people do things in other places. Like I said earlier, and I think this is the message that I've been trying to relay is that, um, like the more exchange that we have, the more communication that we have with each other, it's really a learning experience for everyone. And always try to be open-minded about creating new ways to do things because that's when you discover like that your limitations are not actually like what your limitations are, that you can actually keep on pushing yourself. So yeah, it's great to be here and great to have this chat with you.
Amazing. You're an amazing person. Like I'm telling you, it's such a great, insightful one. And I feel happy about looking at things differently because it's so humbling. And your presence was also very humbling. So I'm happy to have you here. Take care and we'll stay in touch in the future as well. Take care. Bye bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.